Continuing on, Joe Loftus, who I hope you all know, is our lobbyist, has been our lobbyist for a number of years, and represents us with our legislature, and has done a good job for us. Joe is going to review a little bit what was done, how it happened, and what your board is kind of looking into for 2023 and on. Ladies and gentlemen, Joe Loftus.
Thanks, Bill. I don't know, Craig, did you leave your stuff up here? Oh, that's okay. Good morning. I think we still got a little bit left in the morning. Craig ate into my time a little bit, but that's okay because I don't have a whole lot to say. I know that the last 18 months since the adjournment of the 2021 legislative session, has been a huge disappointment for all of you in that the General Assembly chose not to fund the 13th check, but only to advance a 1% COLA. Now, that's been a disappointment. I can tell you that it has been a particular disappointment for your board members and for your executive director, Bill Murphy. They've all taken it really, it's been a difficult time for the board. Every meeting that I've attended, I can tell you that all of the board members and Bill Murphy, that is the number one priority for them as to how to get back to the 13th check. And so I want to kind of dispel a little bit. I agree with what Craig said. I was able to catch some of it from the strategic goals 1 and 2 about the importance of your participation. But I think I need to be honest with you. This is not an issue of the entire Indiana General Assembly. And in 2021, we had not only the 13th check, but an increase in the 13th check in House Bill 1227. And that passed the Indiana House of Representatives with only one dissenting vote. And that would have not only funded the 13th check, but would have given a $50 increase in the 13th check. I would submit to you that the legislators, if given the opportunity to vote, out of 150 legislators, my guess is 140 plus would support your benefit increases. There was a set of unique circumstances that occurred in 2021 that affected us. It's hard for for all of you to understand the dynamics of the Indiana General Assembly and just how this happened, but it happened. So I want to kind of go back a ways, even before 2021. I've been representing Ripia at the General Assembly since 2014. And one of the things that we were always told when we approached the legislature was, how are you going to fund the increase? How are you going to fund this? Whether it be a 13th check, whether it be a cost of living increase, whether it be the tax exemption for the benefits received. That's always been the question. How are you going to fund it? And so a number of years ago, we worked with then Senate leadership, the chairman of the Appropriations Committee, members of the Appropriations Committee, and we passed legislation to set up reserve funds for not only PERF, but for the teachers, because the fact of the matter is that as a public employee, you're not separated from the teachers, and the teachers are not separated from you. So whenever we're talking about a 13th check or another benefit, everybody gets lumped together, so they're treated together. So it's not only the fiscal impact for you, it's the fiscal impact for the teachers, and that's how the legislature looks at it. But we went back and worked with leadership and the appropriations chair to create reserve accounts. And those reserve accounts were intended to accumulate additional revenues that we could then use to answer the question, how are you going to pay for this? And that was what we proposed to pay for the $50 increase in session 2021 that was in House Bill 1227. And those supplemental reserve accounts had grown to well over $100 million. And so we thought we were making a modest request. I think our total request, the $50 increase, was going to take about $17 or $18 million out of that fund. So it would have allowed it to continue to accumulate to provide for a greater cost of living in the future. So as we approach this from the House of Representatives in 2021, as I said, the House introduced the bill. The bill was passed not only by the Pensions and Labor Committee, but it was passed by the Ways and Means Committee. And the House voted on it with only one dissenting vote. That went to the Senate, and it was the prerogative of the Appropriations Chairman to not hear that bill, but to say he was going to take care of it in the budget. And that's what the Appropriations Chairman did. He took care of it in the budget, but he did so by providing for the 1% cost of living increase. And you can say, well, how could that happen that one person could do that? But that's exactly what happened. If you'll recall, for years we had lobbied on behalf of both a cost of living increase and a 13th check. And the Appropriations Chairman took the position that you hadn't had a cost of living increase for years, and so he was going to support a cost of living increase as opposed to a 13th check. And in his mind, that was a better benefit because it cost the state more money. Not that it was going to help you, but that as a cost of living, since we had been requesting that, that would be the better solution. We worked against that. I worked in collaboration with the teachers, and we both opposed the cost of living, and we sought to have the 13th check reinstated in the budget. And then, every session's a little different and things happen differently. And we got to the end of the legislative session, and the House was not in control of that issue for the first time in my memory, but it went to the Senate. And so in the Senate, because the Senate chairman of the Appropriations Committee wanted the COLA, that's what stayed in the last version of the budget bill. And so at that point in time, members of the General Assembly are given an option to either vote for the bill or not vote for the bill. And that was the way the bill passed. It was a set of unique circumstances, unfortunately, that, again, it's hard to explain, hard to understand from your perspective because you were hurt by it. But nonetheless, that was the way it happened. I can only tell you that going into the 2023 legislative session, we are prepared for that not to happen again. And we will not be surprised by that having happened, and the circumstances that led to that happening will not reoccur. And it has to do with the health of the Ways and Means Committee chairman. Just a lot of factors came together at the end of that last legislative session to result in the COLA versus the 13th check. And so as I have participated in the meetings, as Craig has outlined for you going into the 2023 legislative session, we've said, okay, what is our top priority? And our top priority is the reinstatement of the 13th check. And we've got to get back to that point and then try to build from there. We still have our reserve accounts. They're still accumulating dollars. And hopefully we'll be in a better position this time. I have the author of the legislation, 1227 from 2 years ago, has indicated to me that he would like to carry the legislation again. I have no reason to believe that that won't pass out of the House Ways and Means Committee and the House of Representatives again with maybe a unanimous vote this time, because the one no vote the last time is no longer going to be a member of the General Assembly. He was defeated in the primary. So So we will have that again, our 13th check bill, and I have no reason to believe it will have any difficulty in the House because they've supported it in the past. But again, we've got to work on the appropriations chairman because he's a firm believer that the COLA is the preferred way to treat your benefits as opposed to the 13th check, because the COLA is built into the base as opposed to the 13th check being appropriated every year. But as those of you who have benefits at the lower end of the schedule experienced, that COLA didn't help you anywhere close to what you were receiving in your 13th check. And then when you add on that the economy that we've been in the last year, it's caused even more difficulties. So would say I've received the resolutions from a number of the chapters that have adopted resolutions regarding the 13th check. To the questions over here regarding the other measures, they're still on our list to consider and look for opportunities to advance those options. But at least unless collectively you say otherwise, our message has been that the 13th check, the reinstatement of the 13th check, is the top priority in the upcoming legislative session. Let me end with just, and I know Craig, I'm going to reaffirm a comment that Craig made. It's really important that you communicate with your legislators. But if you go back to what I said earlier, that only one person voted against you in the House of Representatives, and if you got to the Senate floor for a vote, the senators would have voted for it as well. Again, I had an appropriations chairman that wanted to go with a COLA. So when a legislator hears from you, they need to hear a positive message from you as opposed to a negative message from you. Because legislators who get a letter, if they voted in favor of the legislation, and then they get a letter that says, you know, I really don't like you and you're really an idiot for having not given us the 13th check, they react negatively to that. That's not helpful. But it is helpful if they hear personal stories from you as to how the COLA has affected you relative to the 13th check. So if you were going to receive $450 as a 13th check and instead got an increase of 25 or 30 cents a month off of that, that's a significant story to tell, and it has a personal impact on you, and it's a personal story that will have an impact on the legislators. So again, I'm cautiously optimistic for the upcoming session about the reinstatement of the 13th check. I have legislators who want to sign on as co-authors of legislation to do that, but we're going to be confronted with a little different General Assembly next time around. I mean, there are as many as 25 members that will be new, and so again, your education of them and helping with the education of them is really critical. I guess I'll stop here and see what you're all interested in and go from there. But again, I just want to reiterate that I've not been to a single board meeting that the board members and the executive director have not taken all of this quite personally, that the COLA passed and not the 13th check, and it's been an agonizing 18 months for those members. Lots of questions. You got it first, so.
I guess my question will be, if the staff and or you will be able to provide us with the outline or a text that will help us to address not only the right language, but point it to the right people.
That's a great statement here at the beginning, and I know that Bill has done that in the past. Included in your monthly newsletter in the past has been a template to be used for communications with legislators. The office does have If you have a question as to who your legislator is, the office is able to answer that question for you, give you an email address. However, I will tell you that a handwritten personal letter mailed to the home of the legislator is more effective than an email, and forms are not that effective. So while we give you a template that says here are the key facts, it's important that you personalize that, because and it's important that you write to the legislator in your district, because if you're writing to legislators that are not in your district, especially if you're emailing them, you know, a lot of that is reviewed by the staff, and if it's outside the district, it's too easy to hit on the computer the delete button. But we'll do that, and we'll recirculate the templates and encourage you to communicate with legislators your personal stories. Yes, sir.
I'm curious about this appropriation chairman that single-handedly nixed the 13th check. One thing, I don't understand why you don't name his name. I'm all for transparency. And if one person puts a screw in something, I want to know who it was. The second thing is...
That's fair.
Yeah. Second thing is, if he's still going to be there, you talked about...
Yes, sir, he's still going to be there.
Well, then...
No, but, okay, so let me answer that question. So when we went back several years ago and worked on the creation of the supplemental reserve funds to answer the questions, how are you going to pay for this? We had a different appropriations chairman at the time. Senator Luke Kenley was the appropriations chairman at the time. He and his staff worked with us. They found a legislator to carry it, and we set up the funds to accumulate the dollars to be able to pay benefits to do that. Senator Kenley retired, which happens all the time. We're always starting over, educating members of the legislature, because there are so many of them that have changed. Since I started working the legislature, which has been a few years ago, there's not a single legislator left that was there when I started. And so the whole legislature, 150 people, have turned over from the time I started working with legislators. So the appropriations chairman is Senator Ryan Mishler. Ryan Mishler is from the Bremen area, but I will submit to you that Mishler is not opposed to giving you a benefit. He honestly and sincerely believed that the COLA was the right thing to do because it was built into the base. And we communicated to every member of the Senate. We sent in emails to every member of the Senate saying, please do not support the COLA. We prefer the 13th check. But as the appropriations chair, he controls the document that is the budget. And in years past, and I'm getting real technical on you from a legislative procedural process, but the bill of the budget is House Bill 1001. Every year it's always House Bill 1001. That is a House bill. And so typically the House Ways and Means Committee chairman is the person who controls that bill at the end of the legislative session. The circumstances that we experienced was that Dr. Tim Brown, who was the Ways and Means chairman, had a very serious motorcycle accident, and he was, it takes a lot of stamina to get through a legislative session and pass the budget. And frankly, Dr. Brown didn't have the stamina to finish the budget at the end, and it was deferred to the Senate to help finish the budget, handing it back over to the appropriations chair who wanted the COLA. That won't happen again because Dr. Brown has retired. We are going to have a new Ways and Means Committee chairman, both of whom are the front runners for that position, are very much advocates for your 13th check. In fact, one of them is one of the top candidates for that position is a retired teacher. And if he ends up in that position, you'll be fine from the Ways and Means perspective. And then they will control the budget at the end of the next legislative session. So I have no reason to believe that the same set of unique circumstances that's only happened once will be repeated. But Senator Mishler is, you know, I'm not apologizing here, because we tried very hard to convince him that the COLA was not the preferred way to do it. And he wouldn't be convinced of that, because we had long advocated for a cost of living increase. And that's the thing that I will say, that why we have to have priorities in terms of what we go after, because we compete with everybody else that wants something. So you usually get one thing. So if you ask for 2 or 3 or 4 things, you might get the one that's the least priority for you, and the General Assembly will say, well, you asked for it and we passed it, so why are you complaining now that we didn't give you something else, we gave you what you wanted? And so I think the Strategic Planning Committee, that's why they have identified the 13th check as the top priority, because that's the most direct benefit to the largest benefit to the collective group of the retired members. Okay, that's probably a lot more rambling than you wanted from me, but that's what's gone on here.
And Mishler still not let it come up for a vote next session?
Correct. He can always do that, because it's if the bill is assigned to his committee, he doesn't have to hear the bill. But hopefully, if you're from that area of the state, and especially if you know Senator Mishler, please feel free to communicate with him. He is not opposed to your benefit. I think he honestly believes and sincerely believes that he did the right thing with the COLA. Lots more. Yes, microphone.
I have some really exciting news to share with everyone. I have a relatively new state senator, and there were a lot of important issues that came up this year. And one afternoon, I called the 800 number to get a hold of my state senator, because I don't call that person pretty much ever. And I went through that number, and they gave me my state senator's phone number, not at the office, his cell phone number. And I know, right? And when he gave me the cell phone number, I left a message on his voicemail, and the guy called. I'm not going to tell you who he is or what the issues are. The guy called me back within 10 minutes. I, of course, missed the call, because that's like my luck. And long story short, we communicated via text, and I will tell you, this guy voted the way that I had hoped he would, not once but twice, on key issues that were really, really important to me. So I understand a template might be good for a letter, but we're an older group of retired employees, and this is an easier, I think most of us, if not all of us, have cell phones. So I just wanted to share that. It freaked me out. I hear from this guy, and he hears from me regularly. Pinch me. I can't believe it.
You know, that's a great story, and for the majority of the members of the General Assembly, I think they would react the same way. They're there to serve you. They want to hear from you, and not everybody, but many of them do. And so there's always been a reluctance to communicate with legislators, and there shouldn't be. They're your representatives. And so, again, thanks for sharing that. That was great points.
Yeah, Joe, will the 13th check being proposed include the $50 amount that has been discussed, the extra $50 amount that has been discussed?
Well,
And then also, is it my understanding, or did I misunderstand something, that the teachers' retirement fund got money from our contingency fund that was given to them?
no, so with the surplus, the state's, I'll answer the last one first. The state's surplus money, the General Assembly did use a chunk of that to put toward the unfunded pension liability. And so our General Assembly, which is making a responsible fiscal decision, they have been buying down the unfunded debt of the teachers' retirement fund for a number of years with extra dollars, because at some point in time then they'll catch up and they won't have to make those investments, which are substantial. So I can only tell you that my conversation with Karakoff was, with Representative Karakoff, was when he expressed an interest in reintroducing his legislation. I honestly didn't ask him, are you just going to reduce the bill that passed 1227, or was it only going to be the 13th check? So I'm assuming we're going to go back with a bill identical to 1227, because our reserve funds should have enough money in it to fund the $50 that we requested. So that would be where I would prefer to start. There's a question down here in front.
Martha Lake, I'm from Howard County, Kokomo. Can any of the retirees testify at any of the hearings? I mean, is there, I've been auditor and treasurer and on ledge committees, and a lot of the time they will hear testimony, and I think some of these stories that you're talking about would be good for them to hear in person in a group. I mean,
I think that's a great idea, and we'll, you know, if there are other folks that wish to do that, we can line up some folks to come to the State House to do that.
right.
I mean, that is the purpose of committee hearings, is to allow for public input, and you know, again, the personal stories that can be told about that are the best way to approach this.
Right, and we would want to have a message that is the same, okay, but maybe just some different facts to go with it.
Yes.
So, yeah.
No, I
So
think that's
who would we contact to do that? Would we
Bill Murphy.
Okay, Bill. So we wouldn't, but you're down at the State House during the whole legislative session, is
Yes.
that right? And you're representing us with the bills that.
But when a bills get scheduled for a hearing, so that it gets communicated to individuals who might want to come down and testify, I mean, all we really need is two or three people
Right.
to be able to share a personal story that they made the trek to the State House to do that.
Good, thank you.
And I'll add, while we're waiting to see who's going to answer the next question, one of the things that RIPIA has done with the board that I think is really advantageous to you, much more so than what the teachers have done, is that we have former legislators, retired legislators, who serve as members of the board, who can bring, you know, their experience and their advice to the board members as they try to craft this legislation. And they also bring their contacts from having been in the General Assembly that they can, you know, where they can reach out to folks as well. So the retired legislators who participate, I mean, are a tremendous asset to this organization. Including my good friend Senator Jackman, who I see sitting there. Other questions? One in the back?
Is that on? What, this reserve fund that's supposed to have $100 million in or whatever, what's that being used for if it's not the 13th check?
Well, I think Senator Mishler might have used some of it to pay for the COLA, but I don't have the exact, we don't have the balance currently, do we?
No, but I was told by Hanford, maybe they can correct it at one time, that they cleaned out the supplemental reserve accounts and partially funded the COLA. So I don't know what.
Yeah, that would be my assumption, that it was used to partially fund the COLA.
But this was, I believe this fund was brought up the last convention 3 years ago. They was trying to get something extra. But it's just sitting there
basically not being used, being appropriated. It's been appropriated. Why?
Well, they use the funds to pay for the COLA, which they drew it down, so then it starts to accumulate money again. I don't have the balance at the
Yeah.
end of the last fiscal year for you,
But-
but there should be a balance in that
But
fund.
that's the only thing it's been used for.
Yes.
Okay. How much is, just for 1 year roughly, is the 13 check cost for 1 year?
I don't know if you heard Bill with the 13th check with the $50 increase was a $67 million cost.
Okay, okay.
I can't see who's got the microphone.
Good morning, Joe. Judith Essex from Indianapolis, retired from the Indiana Senate as staff. And I think what some of the people here might appreciate knowing is that anytime the legislature is in session, you can go online and watch absolutely everything. And committees, the committees, everything. And I think that's really a good way to keep yourself informed and know exactly what is happening. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Bill's telling me one more question so that we get you to lunch sort of on time. Yes? How many lobbyists?
Yes, how many? You are a lobbyist representing,
Oh, there's no limit on how many. It's whether the association wants to pay them all. So, anyway, but that's really so. But I will be honest with you, as a lobbyist, I can only do so much, whether it's me or anybody else. I carry your message, but the message from you as individuals to your elected officials outweighs me, and you could put me and 10 other people on this, and your communications as legislators are more important. And it's not a question about how many lobbyists there are. It's just, it is, but again, you can have as many as you want.